When in a conference, the organizer find that their crowd is a bit too cheerful, people have a bit too much of enthusiasm, that's when they call me, and I'm usually here to calm you down. We are overly enthusiastic, and I'll discuss a bit of the why. I think there's a structural reason why knowledge translation field has a tendency to see the world with rosy glasses. First, when you read the first papers from the Canadian Foundation, for example, people were really optimistic. It's going to change the world. Well, it has proved much tougher than we thought. It's a complex, social, human process that we don't control that much. Huge pile of data on the effectiveness of knowledge translation, which ranges to nothing to very little. If you have enough money, like lots of, you can impact change in practice. Take the drug industry, for example. As long as you have really an almost unlimited supply of manpower and money, you can make a difference. So the challenge we have as researchers is that we usually don't have the means of our ambitions. After 25 years, we're not exactly sure how to call what we're doing, and we are not exactly sure that it does exist. It might. It's not obvious that we are even able to properly define the phenomenon that we are talking about. It has to do with information as a tool to change practice. The first question I think we need to ask is whether or not our systems are changing over time. We take this for granted, but it's not that obvious. How much is changing? Definitely there are things that are changing, but there are things that are obviously not changing. And if you don't understand and define what's changed and what's persistent in the system, you will just have trouble to have the proper action to influence change. In a system that is not changing, what's the role of research and by extension knowledge translation? Well, it's mostly like an historian or an astronomer. You describe something and you can just lament on whether or not you like its state. Let's pretend that the systems are changing. If they are, or at least if sometimes they do change, then there is the second question. How much of that change someone somewhere controls? If there's change but no one controls it, then research is like the weatherman. Knowledge translation and researcher are in the position to say, we see the storm coming. We can warn you over the consequences. But I'm sorry, but there's nothing you can do about brace yourself. System change, we control the change, and we always have been able to control system change. I've struggled quite a bit to find a serious framework, academic, serious conceptual framework that would support this, and I failed. For one main reason, which is, if this were the case, how do you explain the current state of the healthcare system? I mean, if we were and always have been able to influence the system deliberately through research, how come it's such a mess? When we participate in that 5-year-old cartoon kind of the research that drives policy, and we use those fairy tale words as, evidence-based policy, come on. We are using a discourse and terms and a representation of the world that does not resemble actual practice. The last possibility is the world changes at least sometimes, and someone can control change at least sometimes, and it's not always like that. So you can have an explanation of how come we're not in paradise yet, because it's not always the case that you can control change and you can change the world. I think we should not take for granted that we can have an influence. It's not because they don't understand. It's because they just don't want to use that information for plenty of reasons that make lots of sense in their world. And unless you are able to change the world they live in, then you're not going to make your information a valuable tool for change. You cannot escape politics. And if you try to say knowledge translation has nothing to do with politics, then you're probably just limiting your vision, and you're probably just not being as effective as you could be. Boringness, a topic where, as a university professor, I'm highly qualified. And there's that notion in the academia that, being dispassionate, describing those probability scores and fantastic methods in a very monotone way is actually a proof that we are doing proper, valid, credible research. Not everybody should be doing YouTube videos with people dancing, trying to attract attention, trying to be different, trying to not to bore to death people. And maybe that guideline of 135 pages of small times 9 characters is not actually the best way to change practice. Can you do knowledge translation if you're not deeply emotionally involved in what you're trying to advocate? I think not. Which in turn brings the question, should every researcher trying to push every one of his results everywhere to any possible decision maker? Maybe not. Maybe knowledge translation should be reserved to those situations where you really believe that this needs to change, you are ready to invest yourself, to put your guts on the table. This is going to work much more than when you're just saying, let's look at the schedule of my research project. Oh, we've reached the knowledge translation part, so let's do it. First step was, this is not going to work. Never, ever. Just forget about it. It's better not to do it.